The hype for player housing is growing, but we've got some questions and growing concerns. Hey, it's Soul, and this is Warcraft Weekly, and I promise it only looks like I'm in front of a green screen, alright? You can help support the channel by liking this video, subscribing for WoW coverage, and catching me live where I'm streaming. Blizzard flew me out to Boston last week, and just this past Monday took me and a few others to their local office to spend the day with a hands-on demo of housing in World of Warcraft. I was a happy mix of being impressed and overwhelmed with the scale and scope of the demo, even with only the limited decor available. I can tell you right now with great confidence that housing in World of Warcraft, it's a literal game changer, and it's going to be a direct and indirect influence in how players consume this game. We're going to land on different parts of the spectrum of enjoyment, but as we play the game and do stuff and collect things, we're going to get tugged back over to our homes to maybe bring some of our collections and achievements to life. The gameplay being introduced is this open-ended, possibly never-ending loop of collection, creation, and inspiration that'll have interested players jumping back in with a gameplay cadence mostly independent of raid tiers, expansion releases, and patches. Housing can very easily equal infinite content in WoW like we've never seen because it's that different. I'm not going to try to fool you though. What I mean by infinite content, I don't mean how Mythic Plus can scale up and you'll always find a greater challenge in combat. But the tools available in housing can mean this space breaks the boundaries that restrict this space to just being a house. But I'm not here to hype things up. Today, I choose violence, and I want to bring up some of the immediate concerns coming from the audience as well as my own. I want to have a chat with you all about the number of houses we'll be getting so far, the shop, and neighborhoods, which we know next to nothing about, but it's an important talking point, trust me. So we're going to start with the easy one, the shop. We know there are going to be housing assets available on the store, as they've said as much, and in multiple interviews they made it clear the approach to housing on the shop is going to be pretty much like everything else in World of Warcraft, with like a 99-to-1 ratio of stuff we can get versus stuff that comes only from the store, which is also kind of questionable too, because eventually shop items show up on the trading post. But that's not necessarily my beef right now. What I don't like from this demo, and others have pointed this out too, is that at the moment there's a shop tab in the house chest. That's where you see your whole inventory of items to place. So think of this flow, you're building, you're doing stuff, and that shop tab is kind of staring at you the whole time. This isn't a huge deal. I'm putting a spotlight on this because of how inconsistent this sort of behavior is compared to the rest of WoW, where it doesn't try to put the shop right in front of your face. I mean, it's right there in the menu, in the menu bar, but it doesn't do a big glow when new items are available. We're notified through the Battle.net client, and we can just wave that off once. I just don't find it to be very tasteful for the shop to be there on this tab, it's not necessary. Imagine going through the collections tab as it is right now. You're going through your pets and mounts and toys. What if there was a tab that showed you all the store stuff there? Would that be bad? There's no wrong answer to that really, but personally I think it's an eyesore, and whatever the case, it's not there now for a reason. So I simply propose let's not have it there, it's just not needed. But by all means, hey, make the coolest and wildest designs for the shop and I'll slowly start saving up Battle.net balance. Okay, with that out of the way, we got to bring up the biggest concern at the moment, only having 2 houses, 1 per faction, across your entire Battle.net account. It's pretty sucky from I want it for each and every one of my alts kind of standpoint. But this doesn't read like an arbitrary or a malicious decision on Blizzard's part. It's kind of a monkey's paw situation if we look at Final Fantasy XIV, where people have to fight for housing spots through bidding wars or risk losing their house when their sub lapses for too long. Really, what is that kind of crap, right? Thankfully, WoW players won't have to worry about that sort of thing, but the perception is that in exchange we'll be restricted to this 1 house per faction, which makes the house less about a specific character and their celebration and more about the warband, many or all of your characters at once, as if it's a warband mansion of sorts. Or think of this as a celebration of you, the player, and your World of Warcraft career. So, less character-centric, more about your accomplishments, a recreation of fun memories in the past, or, whatever you want to express, really. In fact, you can probably pull off everything I'm talking about in a single home based on our testing. But for some, it still falls short of expectations. Not everyone wants an Avengers complex or kind of an apartment for the warband, or maybe they do, but they also want that isolated cabin in the woods for some of their loner characters. I don't fault anyone for wanting more out of housing despite the pretty impressive showing so far. If nothing else, I want you to remember this takeaway. The devs were both kind of clear and kind of cagey about the subject. They want your feedback, so please comment below, leave your feedback, and maybe by the time we go live, we can have more homes to suit our alt on top of this whole neighborhood thing. But for now, let's react a bit more to the current situation. We should consider we live in a world, or real world, where resources are finite. Final Fantasy XIV has their housing restrictions for a reason, and even still, so many years later. World of Warcraft, at the moment, is talking up these restrictions, again, for a reason. We can all ask ourselves, like, do we want 2 epic-sized houses and take the approach of like these warband shared spaces that can suit a large number of characters? Or do we want multiple, much smaller houses we can have for many or all of our alts? When they first announced housing with the one house per faction thing, the gears were already spinning in my head. Plans were being made. I already thought of the whole, hey, do I want 2 houses or like a whole bunch of houses? And I figured that there's just this kind of mathematical difference between one or the other. Word of warning, I'm going to try to sell the one house per faction idea kind of hard for the next few minutes because, especially after doing some play testing, I have a pretty good sense of what I want to do with what's given. So I'm kind of tainted, right? It's like I'm going to come off as out of touch, and I don't mean to. Hopefully I can share with you my vision, even if in the end you don't buy into it. For those of you who know my playstyle, even after 20 years of WoW, I'm still like a one character kind of guy. So my house is going to be more like a celebration of my WoW career. It's going to be a reflection of my preferences and like a nostalgia trip, which will include other characters I've played. So I prefer a big single space that all my characters can enjoy, as opposed to splitting my attention between so many homes and having to maybe log on to multiple characters. Assuming we'll at least have profession tables, I'm going to set up a cool blacksmith and engineering area, those are my favorites, and there's going to be plenty of room to even fit all the other crafting professions in a single large room, complete with maybe I'll do like multiple levels and I'll connect them with like ramps, or maybe if there are cool pipes and other steampunk stuff, maybe the whole room will be mostly engineer themed, but still have the flavor to represent other professions. And as a big nerd, maybe I'll have like in the center a big teleportation pad that it might not even do anything, and I'll just stand there like a dork and use my wormhole generator anyway. I'm going to want to have like a multi-level armory to show off my shield and random transmog collection. If I can, I'll stack 3 of basically these kinds of rooms and line the walls with like nothing but shields and standing pedestals for other memorable weapons or armor. You know, that would sound really cool. Meanwhile, somewhere in another wing, I'll build probably like a mini Paladin Order Hall to celebrate the best class in the game, and somewhere there I'll have a lounge to enjoy a bit of coffee. But you know what? I could probably still also fit maybe like 15 or 20 individual bedrooms or small apartments for memorable alts for no reason other than, oh, this person has a really cool name like Solid Snake. Or I'll have a room for my very first character, my Warlock, and have a cool homage to Soul Machine. That was my glyph bender tune for many years, and now he can enjoy a well-deserved rest. The coolness of my house being a part warband dorm comes from there being a lot of space to work with. Sadly, during the demo, we can only choose 3 screenshots to keep. The only wide open shot I have is this, where I made a stupid pile of tables, but you know, this is an important shot. This here is called a large, tall room. It's a wide area with a lot of height, so we can make multiple levels of this if we want. This is what I mean about fitting workshops of every profession in this one room if we have the tools to do so, you know, with space left over. I don't think the other creators, including myself, did a very great job of demonstrating just how big one house can be, so I'll try to offer a little bit of context. A few blog posts ago, when Blizzard first demonstrated the placement of objects, we got a few screenshots. All of these screenshots took place on this sized plot. It's called a large room, and we can see the dev who set this up, they made 5 smaller rooms divided by walls that can be placed down. That makes for one room out of the so far 10 large rooms that can be placed. What I'm trying to say is that this isn't just a house, it's a massive complex or a labyrinth if you want it to be. Like a guild could fit in here. And in the case of warbands, there can be this mix of individual and shared spaces to celebrate the character and the player level all in the same building because there's plenty of room, at least so far. I know I'm theory crafting my own player behavior here, and I'm sure many of you are like, dude, this is stupid, Blizz. Just, give me like 65 or so smaller houses. And I believe you when you say that. Personally, I feel like I'm going to have a hard time feeling excited to be like, okay, I'm done with this character. Now I'm going to log on to the next character and start all over again in another house, in another neighborhood, and set up another yard and living space and trophy room and so on, and get all the furniture to support that. But it seems neat to imagine my warband descending into the profession workshop, or to walk by the quarters of my favorite characters in a single visit. Even better if those characters actually show up. We're going to talk about neighborhoods in a bit, but here's another thought to consider. Let's say that Blizzard's like, hey, cool, you guys can have 10 houses. Cool, and we do it. So now we have 10 houses. And the way that it works, it's going to be across 10 neighborhoods. Some are public, some are going to be private. But we can't be logged on to 10 characters at once, obviously. We can only be logged on to one. Now let's pretend everyone who participates in player housing also sets up 10 houses. How would neighborhoods look in the long term? What would the optics be? 100% of these players might be busy and having a great time with decorating and collecting, but what's the likelihood they'll even run into each other because they're going to be working on house number 8 while other people are going to be working on houses number 2 or 7 or 9, or they're just doing other things in the game. Because of the fundamental nature of neighborhoods, allowing too many homes per account would risk compromising the community aspect of neighborhoods on the very first day, with a ton of public neighborhoods that are very sparsely populated, and the passage of time or private neighborhoods, that wouldn't help because our management would be split on a regular basis. Limiting the number of houses per player to the one per faction, it makes this a non-issue because all your characters per faction at least are living and working on the same place. In exchange, we have these absolutely large, massive building spaces that we can fill in and create these cozy and highly detailed rooms within rooms. I feel very strongly that for the launch, I think we should go all in with the warband style housing with an emphasis on social stuff, but also, and maybe they can announce this soon, also start developing the single instance, the smaller scale home for those who want their characters away from the warband and in some isolated place. I'm not suggesting to do one thing over the other, just what to do first. When I sit down to think it over, it feels easier to start off with being doing the whole social thing and then breaking off to more private housing as opposed to the other way around, where we'd have like all these different houses set up and then we're asked to then consolidate and move in together. I think that'd be a disservice. So we got to talk about neighborhoods, although actually correction, Blizzard needs to talk about neighborhoods because the way they're framing it, neighborhoods feel like a very critical part of the housing experience, and I just speculated earlier, it's one of the main reasons why we only get the one house per faction, probably to keep neighborhoods alive and thriving for its participants. So here's what we've learned so far. From the B-roll, NPCs will populate parts of the neighborhood, living in their own modest homes and bringing a bit of ambient activity in a maybe sort of center square. But the aim of the neighborhood is to encourage social activity between players or neighbors, and together can develop the neighborhood or shape it into a reflection of collective effort, I guess. For example, if we wanted to have the neighborhood feel like it's winter or Halloween year-round, like the holidays, apparently that's possible. During the PAX panel on Friday, the devs described a situation where at some point we would help somebody out on a quest, and that someone would then start showing up in the neighborhood for a while and they would give us stuff because, hey, we helped them. But then eventually they'd stop showing up because I guess we gotta go out and help them out again, and then they'll return. That about sums up what we know, and as hopeful as I am about housing overall, I gotta say I'm kind of a skeptic on neighborhoods' social features. I'm just not quite feeling the excitement quite yet. Now, the other things I do like, of course, it's great to have like this public space where I can take a stroll and see the amazing creations that my fellow neighbors are bound to make, and then get secretly jealous and quietly try to destroy them. I'll have a private neighborhood for the guild, and maybe I'll build a second home on public neighborhoods for the Alliance side, but that's really going to depend on if I can save my rooms as like templates and then basically copy my home, assuming I have all the resources available. Or maybe my Alliance house will be nothing but a long hallway and a bunch of dummies wearing random transmog. That'd be kind of fun as long as no one has a seizure. Well, what will have folks coming together in their neighborhood, especially public ones where folks are just kind of hobbled together? Because I'm going to be real here, like public neighborhoods, week one of housing, it might seem cool, and then it'll suddenly just fall off because just like anything, some folks are going to check it out and decide, oh, okay, this is totally not for me. And then they dip out entirely, or at the very best, they'll be very infrequent visitors. Public neighborhoods will quickly turn into Swiss cheese. So I'm going to be very curious how the game is going to consolidate players who are in these fixed locations to make sure neighborhoods are filled with active players. I suppose even if people are moved to a different public neighborhood without their permission, it's not going to be such a big deal considering they'll still be at least on the housing plot they chose. I'm not as concerned for private neighborhoods whose owners are going to have control over everything. The question is still going to be if these features are going to have that proper balance of being fun and compelling, but not so required it's going to burn people out or feel like a chore to commit to every single day. So I hope we learn more of these big unknowns very, very soon. Other features and asks from players, that's going to keep piling higher and higher. I just want to know more so I can get into that headspace and, do more mental planning of my fun little space. And that's the show. This past week has been absolutely crazy. It's been insane between visiting Boston for the very first time and meeting a bunch of players and developers and fellow creators. I'm sorry I don't have, I'm not really much for pictures. I'm one of those types who's too busy, like kind of being in the moment instead of trying to capture that moment on film. But the experience was incredible. It was exciting. It was humbling and really empowering. Because here I am standing next to the likes of S-Fan and Dratnos and Taliesin and Preach. And then there's like little old me. So your words of encouragement and positive energy and the critical feedback too, it gave me what I needed to eventually land these visits to Blizzard and do developer interviews and getting access to insider stuff. And hey, I don't even have a 2K Mythic Plus score. How about that? Anyway, this visibility, it's a real gift that each and every one of you give by watching and joining me live and talking with me in the comments or the Discord channel or wherever, and of course being a patron. And now you get to pay the consequences. So thanks for making it to the end and feeding the algorithm. Stay tuned for next week as we cover the most up-to-date wants for player housing, and we prepare for week one of Terrific Visions, where I'll take you on an easy ride through what's new and how to do it. Please like the video, subscribe for more WoW coverage, catch me live, and man, this green screen looking thing, man. Stay safe, stay healthy, and stay breezy.